So we're continuing our discussion now on how to display related calendars. So let's go ahead now and close that down. And then if we quickly go back to working preview, we can see now that we have this button over here which actually goes ahead and opens the calendar. So let's go now and take a look at how that button was defined. So we'll go now over to action buttons, and then let's go here and edit this action button and then click on the JavaScript. So you can see we're just calling the standard action JavaScript action to open a calendar component, and then we've chosen this particular calendar component over here, but the interesting stuff happens in the argument binding. So the calendar to show is the calendar for the person themselves. So the ID for that calendar will be stored in the calendar ID field, and that's pretty easy to understand. So let's just quickly go back here and look at this. So when we go here, when we press this button, we're going to be displaying this calendar ID, so the row that has focus. So in that case it'll be 3 over here. So the calendar to show is just read out of this calendar ID field, but the read-only calendars need to be read out of this child grid over here. We need to basically read all of these values out of the child grid. So for example, if I'm on this record over here and I would have pressed the open calendar button, what I want to do is harvest all of these values from the child grid over here, and that's where it gets a little tricky. So let's go back now to design mode and go look now again at our actions, and then look at the argument binding, and now we can see that the read-only calendars are bound to a JavaScript function called getRelatedCalendars. So there's a JavaScript function called getRelatedCalendars. So let's go take a look now at how that JavaScript function was defined. So I'm going to go now over to JavaScript. So here's my function called getRelatedCalendars, and the first thing that I need to do in order to read the read-only calendar IDs from that child grid is I need to get the name of that child grid, its alias, and that is stored inside the underbar linked grids object that is part of the current grid object. So inside, whenever a linked content is opened up from a parent grid, the alias of all of the child grids is stored in an object called underbar linked grids. And as you recall earlier, we indicated that the linked content section was called XX, and since this is the first grid in that linked content section, it has an ID of 0. So this construct over here is giving us the name of the linked content grid, and then once we have the name, we can get the object by using the window construct and then calling the harvest column method and harvesting the related groups method, and then we just return that value. So if I were to go here and just put in alert Cals, so we can actually see what happened, and then go over to run it right now. When I press this button over here, what I expect to see is 2, 31, 41, etc. So let's go ahead and press the button, and indeed that's what I see. So there's 2, 31, etc. So this is the value that is being fed into the read-only grids argument. So that's how we're able to open up the grid showing Maria Anders as an updatable calendar, and then all of these calendars here as read-only calendars. So this is obviously quite an advanced technique here, but it is very powerful, and it does show you how you can easily create related calendars to display whenever you display a particular calendar. I hope that you found that interesting. Thanks very much.